So let's get this started. My name is Janna. I'm the co-founder of ProdPad, and we're joined here by Daniel Elizalde. I'm going to give a full introduction to him, but first I want to tell you a little bit about the series that we're here doing. So this is the Product Expert Fireside series that we run, and it's a series of webinars that we've been running for a couple of years now, a few years now actually, and the past ones have always been recorded. It's a mixture of presentations and firesides. Today's going to be a fireside, so a chat between myself and Daniel. It's actually going to be about his book, the B2B Innovation Journey. And we always bring on amazing experts from around the world. And it's always with this focus on their insights, a focus on the content, on learning and sharing from the experiences that they bring to the table. So today is going to be recorded and it is going to be shared with you all, and it's something that you can share with other people. So you also will have a chance to ask questions today as well. So you can use the chat for that, or if preferably actually use the Q&A section. That way I've got a much better chance of actually seeing it. But feel free to use the chat today and talk to each other about what you think about the points that myself and Daniel are making, or jump in with your own thoughts. Now, a little bit about ProdPad before we get started. So this is originally a tool that was built by myself and my co-founder, Simon Cast, who you might know. We were product managers ourselves and we needed tools to do our own jobs. Nothing like this existed. We needed something to keep track of the experiments we were running, to try to hit the business objectives that we were given, and to solve customer problems, and to keep tabs on all the ideas and feedback that made up our backlog. And so building ProdPad gave us control and organization and transparency into the process. And so it wasn't long before we started sharing it with other product people around us. And today it's used by thousands of teams around the world. So it's free to try. We even have a sandbox mode where it has example product management data. So you can see how things like lean roadmaps and OKRs and experiments and ideas and customer feedback and all that stuff fits together in a product management space. And our team is made up of product people, from founders through to many other people in the team. So start a trial today and then get in touch and let us know your feedback. We'd love to know how it's working for you. Now, on that note, let's kick off and talk a little bit more about Daniel here. So how do I know Daniel? I believe we know each other through possibly South by South networks, and then became part of the Product Tank network, where he was an organizer, both Product Tank Austin and SF, because he's had a chance to move around in different areas. But I'd consider Daniel a longtime product friend, somebody who I've been able to lean on for questions, the product nature. He's an expert in the area. He's now an advisor and coach, and now the author of the B2B Innovators map. So definitely a book that I'd recommend checking out. Daniel, it came out recently, is that right? When did that come out?
2 months now.
2 months now. Excellent. Well, congrats on the new book. And you've got more than 20 years of experience across a range of industries. I love this. It's manufacturing, aerospace, automotive, telecoms, e-commerce, and now things like renewable energy. And you've had a hand in building enterprise products as well as IoT, as well as a range of different things in between. So you've got this wealth of experience, which is really interesting that you've brought forward here. You've also trained thousands of product people, either in companies in-house or through the likes of Mind the Product, where that's where we had the chance to work together, as well as with Stanford University, where you train students there. So really bringing a wealth of expertise to this. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Everyone, give Daniel a warm welcome. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you so much, Anna. It's a pleasure being here. You've been an inspiration in my journey for many years, and I even put that in the book.
So thank you so much.
I'm really glad to have this conversation throughout our journey together. Thank you for having me.
Now, before we get into the core topic of the day, I want to address the fact that you've mastered this vertical jump. Like, you've worked and taught and consulted in enterprise space, IoT, climate tech, which we want to hear some more about as well, and B2B spaces, which makes you a hugely dynamic product person. Making a leap into a different space is often seen as desirable, but difficult. So how's it been for you? What have you learned along the way?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. And I've been very purposeful about my career and about the jumps that I want to make. I always say that I am passionate about the specific industry problem that I'm trying to solve. For example, today, as a climate tech advisor, I'm passionate about addressing the climate crisis through technology. And I think product management plays a key role And so if you backtrack, what do you need to jump into these different industries? Yes, there is different domain industries to understand the problems of the stakeholders and the ecosystems and how the verticals work and all that. But I think that what has helped me is I've cultivated a few tools throughout my journey. So for example, I've always worked in B2B. So I understand really well how the business to business works, whether you're at a startup or at an enterprise. If you're selling to another company, it's B2B. So I understand the challenges of B2B. And then from a specific technology trends perspective, I focus a lot on IoT, Internet of Things, connected hardware and software. And so if you put all those things together, the leap to manufacturing, to aerospace, to climate tech is not that different because they are all B2B and they are all usually IoT. They're connected devices, hardware, and software. So it's just a matter of bringing in your innovation and product expertise, learning about the domain, but you have this big foundation that allows you to jump across.
Perfect. So you're finding the adjacent spaces that you can add value in.
Exactly. And now as an advisor, for example, when I work with a climate tech company, yes, I know climate tech, I understand the space, the ecosystems, et cetera. But I also can say, hey, by the way, we tried this in manufacturing, or I work with an aerospace company and we did that and it didn't work or it did work. So you're able to pull from a lot of different similar experiences of industries that might be one step ahead or 2 or 3 steps ahead, right? Because for example, energy is kind of behind a few years versus CRM software. But if I have that experience, I can say, by the way, these other companies have done it like this, and this is what works. So It's been interesting to put all those pieces together.
Yeah, I love that. And what love what you're doing is taking the knowledge that you have as a product person and applying it to the most critical problems that we have in the world. I mean, yeah, we could all go build CRMs, other tools for B2B, but what problems could we solve for the world if we focus on climate tech? Is that something you could speak to?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'm very passionate about that. And of course, climate tech is a big umbrella of different types of technologies to solve the climate crisis, right? So it has to do with food and with moving away from powering our cities with fossil fuels and electric vehicles and all that, right? So there's a big umbrella, but it's so interesting because let's take one example, the transition away from fossil fuels. The whole thing is called the energy transition. And there are so many companies working on that, supported by amazing software and hardware that is not only critical to do because of the crisis that we have, but there's a tremendous opportunity for economic opportunity and for companies to grow. I mean, it said the next $1 trillion company is going to be climate tech companies. The richest man in the world, Elon Musk, is from a climate tech company. And what I'm seeing out there is that all these companies either have a strong technology or strong domain expertise, but the innovation piece is lacking. So I believe that product managers have a lot to give in this area because it can help put the pieces together and make sure that we get the right products for the right customers the first time, because we don't have a lot of time to waste. So I'm passionate about it. This is what I do, but I invite others to check it out. And if you want to talk more about it, I'm always happy to do so.
Yeah,
I'm also a mentor at two of the biggest climate tech accelerators in the US. And so I get to work with corporates, but also with a lot of early seed startups. And it's fascinating what's going on. There's so much going on, and we need your help.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks for that, Daniel. And before we change the subject and talk about the book that you've written here, where can people learn more about that subject? Where do you talk about the climate tech stuff that you do?
It's all on my website. So on danielelizalde.com, I have different talks and I have articles and my podcast. And so not everything is about climate, but there's a lot of climate there. And in my book, because that's a lot of my experience, I would say half of the examples are from climate-related industries that apply, that all B2B. So yeah. And if you're interested, I often talk about the importance of PMs in climate and how you can get into climate. I've done several talks about that. So reach out and I'll be happy to point you in the right direction.
Excellent. Excellent. Definitely something we want to hear more about. In the meantime, I want to hear a little bit more about this book. You titled it, How to Get from Idea to the First 10 Customers. I mean, why focus on that particular problem? What was the inspiration for this book?
Yeah, the inspiration of the book is really my career journey. And I've been fortunate to have the opportunity to interact with a lot of startups and large corporations, to be an executive at startups, an executive at multi-billion-dollar corporations, to teach at Stanford, see all these different perspectives. And when you talk about B2B, the reality is that everybody talks innovation, but not a lot of people understand how to do it. And when you dive into the numbers, the majority, we're talking about 80% or more of the innovation initiatives die before they get to the first 10 customers. And so there's a lot of thought about, well, you need product market fit, or you need to do all these things. And I think that all the lingo for innovation is a little bit abstract. It doesn't really tell you concretely how to do something. And so the premise of the book is we need to be customer driven and know when is the right time to make the next level of investment. In my experience, your first 10 successful customers in a B2B setting is a good indicator that you have market traction. And since most companies never get there, I thought I'm going to break down that journey so that we can apply our product philosophy into that innovation journey so that we can ensure that more companies get to those 10. And from there, you can decide what's the next step, right? It's not 10 and then scale, but it's a good indicator that you're going on the right track.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you call out product market fit because it's such a nebulous term and it's a moving target anyways, isn't it?
Yeah, in fact, I describe in the book about how product fit is actually counterintuitive, because as an innovator, somebody driving the innovation process at a company, you need to have people aligned. And you ask 10 people, what is product market fit? They all give you different answers. So you can't have alignment if you can't have the same language. And so, but product market fit creates that abstraction and that nebulosity, I think, right? So 10 successful customers is very tangible, it's very concrete. You know, you have 3 or 4 or 5, and you can be very clear about your goals. And I took an abstract of the book and I created an article that's on my website on why we need to move away from product market fit. And I posted on LinkedIn expecting there's going to be this big backlash of like the agile and the lean purists. And it wasn't. Everybody was like, yeah, we've been thinking about this. We hate it. You're right. Glad you said it. And I was like, wait, where's the controversy? Where's the discussion? So I think people are, especially in the B2B world, are ready to move on.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so there's some interesting terms that you use in there. Like you talk about the innovator's map. I mean, who's the innovator in this case?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in my book, I describe the innovator as the person responsible for delivering new products to market. And so if you are part of a team delivering new products to market, you are the innovator. And because of my product background, initially I started writing for product managers. And so it was a product leadership book. But then as I kind of ate my own dog food, right, and interviewed a lot of people and understand their pains, it turns out that the more I was talking to companies launching new products, smaller companies, they don't even have the function of product. So I was talking to CEO, to founders, to CTOs. And then in large corporations, in corporate innovation teams, I was talking to the VP of innovation or some CTO that got moved in or some director of engineering. And so all of a sudden, everybody could come together under the term innovator. And so I thought, if I really want to get this message to whoever is driving new products to market, I'm gonna make it a little bit more abstract and make it an innovator. And so, believe it or not, less than half of the people that I talk to that are launching new products have the title product manager, right? But they just say product management is a tool that I need in my journey, but I'm not a product manager, right? So there's good and bad in those.
Yeah,
and that more product managers.
That actually checks with what I see here at ProdPad as well. I mean, a lot of the people who end up using ProdPad come to us because we can see the search intent. They're looking for tools that help them build products. But when you actually look at their title, when you talk to them, they're not product managers per se. Maybe they should have that title, or maybe they're the founder and they're looking to maybe get to that point one day, or maybe they're part of a large corporate and they've got some mangled title that's been bashed together by a bunch of different org charts. I've seen all sorts of different things, but innovator is a nice tidy way of wrapping it up, isn't it?
Yeah, because it's ultimately what you're doing. Like I was the head of the innovation department for Ericsson in Silicon Valley for IoT and 5G. My title was Vice President, Head of IoT for North America, right? So it seems to resonate well, and everybody likes to say I'm part of innovation, and at least to start putting some definitions, real definitions, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so you talk about these stages of the innovator's map. What are the core stages that we should consider going through?
Yes, thank you for that. So I break down the innovation journey from idea to your first 10 customers into 6 stages. The first one is strategic alignment, then market discovery, user discovery, solution planning, prototyping, an early adopter. And so the way that I laid out this map is that it's not linear, but it's iterative. So the idea is that there are clear criteria that you have to meet to go from, let's say, strategic alignment to market discovery, from there to user discovery. But then if you don't meet that criteria, you can either iterate on that stage until you get it, or you can go back. If you didn't find enough user evidence, it's okay to go back to market discovery and iterate there, right? And so that's why it's really a back and forth. And I have a lot of examples in the book on how it works. So it's not a waterfall. You start here and you end there, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing that I focused on specifically is, like the book says, it's a B2B journey. And so every single stage has to do with how is this different in B2B versus B2C. And that's why even in the later stages, for example, prototype in B2B, and especially my field of heavy industry. And then the last stage is early adopters, meaning how do you deal with early adopters? How do you run pilots? How do you get out of pilot purgatory? All that stuff that all B2B people love to hate.
How do you get out of pilot purgatory? I like that. What is pilot purgatory?
Pilot purgatory. So just to take a step back, in the book, I describe why corporations are very fond of pilots. It makes a lot of sense, right? You're trying to bring in a product and a technology that it's not proven in the market. And so you're going to have to test it out. You can't roll it out to your whole corporation immediately. And so what happens is that a lot of pilots are either ill-conceived or ill-executed. And so you never get past that pilot and you never get that successful customer. So when I say that a lot of companies never reach 10 successful customers, it's really they don't get the customers, or when they do, they get stuck in forever pilots or pilots that die because they could have been avoided. And so they never get past to the growth stage. So it's this idea that you engage with a company and they are going to continue to asking for more things. And then eventually they're going to say, this was cute, but we're going to go and buy Microsoft or buy SAP or whatever.
Right, yeah. And so should pilot projects be something that you charge for as a business providing them? And how do you go about figuring out a price for that? How do you go about asking for the money for that when you know it's a product that is less than 10 customers, for example?
Yeah, and that's an excellent question. And it all goes down to the way I perceive the journey is by following these 6 stages, you are very early on from stage 2, market discovery, already engaging with specific companies, trying to understand their pains, and you're carrying them along. So you're building these relationships. And when you get to the prototyping stage, you're actually building some software and hardware and testing it out. And if you have those good relationships and you build something that really solves the problem that you've been hearing from that customer and a few others, then the customer will want to say, you know what, I want to try your product and I want to buy it. It's important to identify that you're talking to an early adopter as opposed to a pragmatist that wants a full solution. So once you identify that person and they are interested, it is important to get payment or payments of sorts, because the whole journey from the stage 1 to stage 6 is an experimentation to see if your product has validity in the market, if you have desirability, feasibility, and viability. So if you're not able to get any money for your pilot, that really puts a dent on desirability and viability. Right? If they're really not willing to pay for it, is the pain big enough? Is your solution the right one? Right? And the right early adopter will be willing to pay. Now, it's not going to be paid full blown. It's going to be paid maybe less. Maybe it's half payment in money, half payment in marketing collateral. You have to negotiate that, right? Remember, these stages are still for learning. So your company cannot see the payment of pilots as incoming revenue for the quarterly report. And so it's about testing the willingness to pay by actually asking them for money.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good to hear those different levers for negotiation as well, like marketing collateral and case studies and things like that. All different ways that you can sweeten the deal for them, but also sweeten the deal for yourself. But I think you're right. I mean, in my experience, if you're not able to get them to agree to put something down for the work that you're putting in, then the chances that they're going to pay for it down the line, chances are they weren't a good customer in the first place. They weren't good for it in the first place.
Exactly. And it is possible that even if they pay, the pilot dies, but that's why it's important to take the early adopter stage as a learning. So you're gonna learn as much as you can from this customer, maybe you're able to grow it, but maybe not. But the reality is that you're after 10 successful customers. And the reason why I say 10 is because by the time you have 10 customers, and in B2B, a customer is a company, right? You're selling to Walmart, you're selling to Target, right? And they might have hundreds of users. So for every customer, once you get to 10, it is very likely that you've seen everything that has gone wrong with the sales process, with the installation process, with the operation process, with the maintenance process, everything, right? And so you're ready to say, you know what, this is a good time for us to invest more because there's more potential. Maybe one or two or three of these initial pilot customers won't continue to grow with us, but it doesn't matter. We got the learnings and we feel comfortable that the market would want this product if we continue to invest. So that's the key, the mindset shift. And the moment that your executive team sees some money coming from somebody, and especially if it's a big brand, the innovator has to be very protective of the goals of the innovation journey, because otherwise it's very easy to say all about the revenue, and then it goes that way and you end up with a bad pilot. And I describe all those examples in the book.
Yeah, this is what I love about this process. It's a really tight process that gets you to not just 10 customers, like any 10 paying customers, but 10 right customers. And along the way, you're inevitably going to end up with maybe there's another 10 who you ended up turning down because you did the research work with them. They didn't make it through the discovery processes. They saw the prototype and went, oh, this isn't for me. Yes. And a lot of teams out there might be drawn to say, you know what, if we're just trying to get 10 customers, like any 10 customers, we'll just try to build for that thing, and they'll get torn away from the path that they're on rather than trying to build for the right 10 customers. And what often happens is if you're built for the wrong customer, you'll never find another one like that, right? I've seen so many teams build something that's so unique to one customer that no one ever is going to build it again, that no one ever is going to buy it again. And so you've almost become like an agency for this one customer. So this process, because it's got these stages in front of it, help make sure that you're actually building something that's of value for the business.
Exactly. I think you're completely right. And I want to emphasize that I think it's an excellent point. The way I address that in the book, in stage 2, which is market discovery, it's all about understanding which target market you are going to go after and understanding who are the champions that you're going to go after and what are their pains. And so when I say 10 first customers, it's 10 customers of the same target market. Sometimes I talk to some companies and they say, yeah, we have 10 customers. One is in automotive, one is in healthcare, one is in aviation. And so what happens is that you don't get a cohesiveness of problem. If you select 10 companies of the same target market, which by the way, I have a clear definition in the book, what target market means, includes industry, company size, geography, use case. And so if they're all about the same, then their problems are going to be similar, and then you can advance that. Now, if you select your target market and you continue through the different stages, for example, user discovery, you might find out that there is no common problem for that particular target market, and that's fine. You go back and either select a different target market or keep the discovery part, right? So that's why by the time you advance these stages, you should have a good understanding of who you're targeting, what their pains are from an economic buyer, from their champion, from their users, and then what potential solution, and then how do you test that solution?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I noticed that you talk about discovery, but not just discovery, you break it down into 2 different stages. I mean, it takes up 2 of your 6 major stages, market discovery and user discovery. I mean, why those 2 different stages, and where does that fit in, and where does customer discovery fit in there? Is that the same as user discovery?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the way I made this distinction is because of one of the characteristics of B2B, which is you have a buyer and you have users, and they might not be the same. And so I treat it a little bit different. What I do is in the market discovery, I focus on techniques to help you figure out what types of companies you go after. That's the first phase. But then within market discovery, now that you say, I am going to go after retail companies that are over $1 billion in the US. Okay. Who within that company has the pain that you have agreed to solve in the strategic alignment stage, which is stage 1? Right? And so let's say that is the director of operations. Well, that becomes your champion. And I use the term champion because in the innovation journey, you're not looking for a buyer. You're looking for a champion that's going to champion your solution, give you feedback, help you get into the organization, put their name on the line so that you can do a pilot, right? So in the market discovery stage, you need to understand the desired outcome that your champion needs to do. So for example, let's say that you're selling a CRM and your champion is the VP of sales, and they have been tasked with increasing output by 30%. That is what they want to do. And so that's your champion, and then you're going to figure out how you can help them. Now, in B2B, the champion might not be the user of your actual product. So that's why I broke down into a different stage. So in the user discovery stage, you're going to figure out who are all the people involved in delivering the activities that together add up to the outcome of the champion. So again, in the CRM example, you have account executives and you have admins and you have IT and you have field people, and all of those are going to enter their deals and all of those are going to do things. And the value of all of that needs to add up to the VP of sales reducing or increasing output by 30%. Right? And so that's why if you don't understand the market and the champion's business outcome, then it doesn't matter, right? And I actually advocate something that is a little bit controversial here. When you go into prototyping an early adopter, I say focus on just the users that are going to help you demonstrate the value to the champion. There's a lot of complaints in B2B that, oh, the user experience for this group is terrible. It's like, yeah, maybe initially it needs to be, or maybe it's completely ignored because you're focusing on these 2 or 3 users whose outcome is going to be most valuable for you to demonstrate your value proposition.
So you're just focusing on the early adopter users within
Exactly.
the subset of the customer group itself.
Exactly, because if you can't demonstrate that by having your software or software hardware combination deliver extra value with a few users, it doesn't matter that you have extra users, right? I in the book, I actually have this clear example where let's say that you're building HR software for recruitment. And the challenge that the champion has is that they need more visibility into metrics for hiring. And so you need to get resumes into the system because otherwise you don't have anything to work with. But the user experience and the feature set for the applicant are less important because as long as you get the data in, right, what you need really to demonstrate is how your AI or whatever it is that you're using can provide those insights for the problem they're trying to solve. If you have the best interface and features for the applicant, but that doesn't really result in impacting the outcome of the champion, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, you've got to solve one particular problem well first and then go from there as well. I mean, I've heard the same thing applied to marketplaces as well. Like, how do you build a 2-sided marketplace? Well, it's really difficult if you're waiting for one side or the other to get started. And I remember back in the days of what you were just saying there, another example is back in the days of before Uber, there was another London-based cab hailing app called Halo. And they launched, and the day that they launched out to the public, there were all these black cabs on there. All the London taxis were already using this thing. And their secret was that they built an app that was already useful for the cab drivers. It was something that would tell them where, if the arena had just let out and there's a whole bunch of people waiting for rides, or if there's a lot of traffic, and it gave them a way to talk to each other. So they built something that was just a useful social network for cab drivers, and then added on the ability to pick up rides. And all of a sudden it was this big success. And then Uber came, which was a different animal, but obviously you can see how that was written.
Yeah, I completely understand. And so that's why in the book, I break the different stages. And so in the user discovery stage, I give a lot of specific techniques on how do you find all the different users and then how you evaluate their pains. Because one of the interesting things about B2B is that even the users are going to be across the enterprise customer lifecycle. That includes the sales process, the installation, the deployment, the maintenance, operation, decommissioning. And so there are players around this whole thing, and you have to figure out which are the right users that you need to focus on. And in the book, I make some very concrete examples of my experience where I left some users out that actually derailed the whole product because I never thought about them. But the user discovery is really who are all the potential users of this solution? And then what are their specific pains? And can you identify a set of pains that are big enough that if you solve those, everything adds up to solve the problem of your champion, and then you have an opportunity to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that the book includes all these specific examples. It also includes example personas and how to lay them out. Like, why and how do you use personas?
Yes, I'm a big fan of persona. So a persona is just a representation of your ideal user. And one of the things that I made a big emphasis on the book is that a lot of times we talk about innovation as a way to understand the market and the customers. But the reality is that as an innovator, we have to spend half of our time externally and half of our time internally, because we have to bring the rest of the organization along. We have to make sure that they understand the process. What are we doing? What is next? Why we need more money? And so it's all about communication. And I found that personas are a great communication tool to get alignment with everybody to say, this is the problem that we are after. These are the different types of people that would benefit for the product. And so it's a way to kind of humanize the different users, put a face to them, and have concrete problems that they're trying to solve. In the book, I give a little form that's been really useful for me of like, these are the things that a persona should have. And when I talk to a lot of teams in my advisory practice, they can't fill even that small form. Like, what is the main 3 pains of this particular user? And so sometimes these tools help you communicate, but they also serve you as a way to say, do we have this information? No, we need more discovery, right? And so it's a lot easier to use this kind of tools this way.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of tools, you talk about an experiment roadmap in the book. Like, when does that come in and what does that mean?
Yeah, so in the prototyping stage, which is stage 5, let me take a step back. The first 3 stages are about understanding the pains of your customers. And then the second 3 stages are about understanding a potential solution that you can deliver to solve that problem. So you have to know the problem, and then you have to figure out what solution. So when you do solution planning, you're saying, which is stage 4, you're gathering all these insights from what you know from the market and the users, and you think, well, if we build this type of product, then we could have a chance. And so, but you thinking of a product doesn't mean that it's going to be successful. So therefore, in stage 5, prototyping, it's all about how do you test assumptions to make sure that what you're proposing as a solution is an actual solution for the problem. Okay. And so I advocate for a lot of different types of prototyping, and always testing around desirability, whether your market wants your product, feasibility, whether you can actually build it, and viability, whether it can be financially profitable. And I actually have a lot of more subcategories there that are very particular. But anyway, so the point here is that you have to have a list of assumptions, and you have to have a way of saying, we're going to test this, and we're going to test this, and we're going to test this. So that simple list of this is the assumptions that we have, and this is how we're going to test it, is what I call the experimentation roadmap. Because at this point, you're not fully building, you are experimenting. And again, the reason I didn't call it a roadmap of experiments or something is because of communication. People assume that when something is in the roadmap, it's a done deal and it's going to be built, for better or worse. And so throughout the book, I give a lot of like pro tip, avoid this lingo, avoid saying this, because you're always signaling that you are in innovation mode. So the experiment roadmap means this is what we're going to spend the next 3 months on. This is why I need money and people. And these are the assumptions that are going to help us figure out whether we have a chance to something here. Doesn't mean this is going to become a product. Right? So it's a way to prime the internal organization that you're not building something yet. You're not ready for that.
Yeah, and it helps the team keep that experimentation mindset. Now, how far out, do teams tend to plan these things? They almost certainly come up with a whole bunch of different things that they could try, ways that they could solve this problem. And there's almost way too much to do. How do they prioritize that? How do they plan out what they're going to do and what they don't do?
Yeah, that's a great question. And here, of course, as with everything else, right, we're standing on shoulders of giants. So here I really rely on a technique that I learned from David Bland in his book, Testing How to Test Business Ideas. And I put that out in the book, which is really, he recommends prioritizing things by how much impact they're going to have and how much customer evidence you need. And so in the book, I have different categories on how to do that for desirability, feasibility, and viability. And then you have to just make them as short as possible. But the way that I focus the prioritization is what has the most impact and what we don't have customer evidence, and always start with desirability. I work with a lot of teams that start with feasibility. Can we build it? It doesn't matter if you can build it if nobody wants it. So start with your experiments for desirability, and then if that is successful, then feasibility and viability become important. Otherwise, they don't matter.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also see so many teams who forget about viability, as in, is it actually something that will support the business? Like, yes. They'll build something because, yeah, some people want it. It solves a problem. It's something you can do, but do enough people actually have that problem that you could actually build a business off the back of it, that you could actually justify the amount of effort that'll go into supporting this thing long term. And I remember exactly. a new feature is for life, not for the new release. I mean, it's not for life. You can always roll it back, but you don't want to waste all that time doing the wrong thing. So yeah, these types of questions at test are hugely important.
Yeah, exactly. And one point that I'll make is that in the market discovery stage, which is stage number 2, I do talk about in the book how to size your market, whether to know if that market has opportunity for viability. Because you have to do that early. If there's not a big enough market for sustaining a business, then go back, right? But then when you're prototyping and you're determining viability, I have other types of viability that I explain in the book. And one of them that is very counterintuitive is what I call internal viability. Meaning,
what's that?
The fact that you have discovered a problem and there's a potential solution, the fact that you found something that can become a product doesn't mean automatically that your company will be willing to get behind it. That's why it's so important to bring them along all the time, because at this point, they've invested in the exploration. But then when you say, you know what, we can actually have a business here, I've had many innovations die at that point because the executive team might say, we didn't expect to go into that vertical, or we are not going to go into that geography, or it's going to cannibalize this other initiative that we have, and they decide to kill it. So yeah. It's very important to keep that momentum and say, your executive team has to get the buy-in at every single step. Otherwise, you will never see the light of day.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where strategic alignment can help, is setting those guardrails, saying, well, this is the type of areas that we're looking at, and this is the type of moral boundaries that we're looking for, and this is the type of tech that we're willing to build with, so that you don't go off and come up with ideas that could be great, you could make money, but are completely off center, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And it's funny to mention that, because strategic alignment, which you haven't talked enough, is the first stage. And I struggled on whether to include this as the first stage, because I thought, anybody doing this, it's all realigned, they already want. But it turns out that it's where most companies get stuck. They have different ideas of what they want, what problems they're trying to chase, why they're chasing them. And so without that alignment, you get nowhere. I've actually collaborated with some companies where their whole alignment is just innovate.
Right.
And so you have these teams doing things, and then showing them to the leadership team is like, is this what you wanted? No. Okay. It's like, and sometimes I talk about with some CEOs about, it's like, well, we just need to grow our money this %, so we're going to do innovation. It's like, no, I mean, if that's your goal, put a food truck, or put it in the bank, or put it in stock, or there's a lot easier, less risky things than starting an innovation process and practice. So you have to have a clear understanding on why you want to do it, and also, as the innovator, explain clearly to the leadership team, this is what the innovation journey looks like. And so if you're going in, I want to ask for your support throughout this, and we might not even get it here. I think a lot of, especially people at the leadership level that are not familiar with innovation, miss that part. And I think us as product leaders and innovators sometimes don't push back hard enough to say, hey, we need that clarity.
Yeah, absolutely. And so in the book, you talk about how executive teams speak a different language from product and innovation teams. Like, in what ways do you see that? How can product people overcome challenges around that?
Yeah, that's a very good point. And it's hard because depending on the leader that is driving the initiative, they speak different languages, right? So for example, finance people, they all speak in terms of returns. And if the innovation falls under some engineering team, it's all about the tech that gets created. Sometimes CEOs are more about just new markets and closing deals. And so none of that is around product. And so it's our job to make sure that we explain the process and then talk to our leaders in the way that is going to make the most sense out of it. If you're talking to a financial person and they're looking for why should they give you this money so that you can get some return in the future, map that out and say, we're going to get that return if we go through this journey, invest this way, and at this point we get an actual product and we start growing in, and at that point we do this and do that, right? And so making sure that people understand the innovation journey and then you explain it to them in the terms of what they care about, that's what's going to give you the support. And it's hard. It's super hard.
Yeah, I mean, half the role of a product person, an innovator, if you like, is communication. And it's not just communicating outwards to your peers, but also communicating upwards.
A lot of it I've seen is communicating upward, especially if you are at an executive level of innovation, where usually the people above you, the C-level folks, really are not really caring that much of what comes out, right? And so they put it onto you. It's like, you figure it out. You just need to add to our Q3 line item. You go here, right?
Just make sure it's going up and to the right.
Yeah, as long as we do that, right? And so that doesn't work, right? Now, what doesn't work also is trying to bring them along and say, let me show you exactly how we're going to do this discovery to show this persona. And maybe, but like, we need to find that balance. Ultimately, we want their support for them to keep us giving us support and money and people to drive the innovation. And we have to set the expectations because innovation is uncertain. Most likely than not, it's going to fail. That's just how it is, right? Yeah. And so I've talked to some folks that their goal of their innovation initiative is to be a unicorn factory. I mean, no, that doesn't work like that.
Right, yeah.
So setting those expectations, because otherwise we're setting ourselves for failure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, most experiments are going to fail. You just don't know which ones, and some are going to succeed. If you do enough of them and you have the right rigor behind them, you will eventually land on something. You just don't know what to level.
Exactly.
And it takes the team, the exec team's willingness to invest in it to make that stuff happen.
Yep. And in the book, I also talk about the expectations of time, because I think that a lot of what we hear about B2C product management has muddied the waters a little bit. Of like, you have to run 100 experiments a day and just sit your team at a Starbucks and ask people. And it's like, I am building a wind turbine offshore the coast of Ireland. Like that, getting the people that you need to talk to, getting the pilot to prove something, or getting a manufacturing facility to stop a line for half a day for you to run a pilot, or it's like very different, right? So getting the right expectation that this is going to take more time, and then you need their executive support to say, hey, I need you to connect me with the CEO of that company so that they can tell their VPs to open the doors for me. I mean, it's a very collaborative thing, and it's going to take time, right? But that's why it's important for, as you as an innovator, explain the process, right?
Yeah,
set the expectations correctly.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things I always point out to people is that while it might be harder to build in hardware or in regulated spaces or spaces where you can't just turn around and push new code the next hour if you see 100 users balk at what your change is. The difference is that you've also got a more defensible space. I mean, provided that you are working with the same sort of tech that your competitors are, you can only move as fast as the tech allows you to, right? And so if you can find ways to iterate as quickly as possible within hardware, you can do some amazing things. And so no one's going to come in and rapidly copy what you just built. Whereas in the software world, you know what, it's people are building it no code in no time at all. Whereas in hardware world, the things that you're learning are defensible. You're building incredible pieces of tech that can solve great problems. And so that's why it does take longer, but also can create a more of a moat between you and the rest of the world, and therefore becomes higher value.
Exactly. I completely agree. And a lot of the work that I do is IoT product strategy, which is that link between hardware and software. And that, if you get it right, yes, you can build those moats. But from an innovation perspective, I think the important thing is what it's going to take some time.
It takes time. Yeah. And you've got to understand that it's not the same as B2C. It's not the same as simple software. Yeah. Exactly. Now, you also, in the book, you recommend staying away from terms like MVP and version 1 and alpha. And I'm very sorry too, Manoj, you just mentioned MVP in the chat there. But why? What are good alternatives to terms like these?
Yes, the reason I say that is because it's all about clarity of communication. MVP is one of those terms that nobody knows what it really means, and there's all these things. Well, it's a one feature MVP. It's a most lovable product. It's like, it's just confusion, and there is so much uncertainty on B2B innovation already. And let's not use that, right? I like the term prototype because a prototype can continue to advance from a very basic, just like back of the napkin prototype to a fully functional, I call it a working prototype. A working prototype is something that a customer can buy and can use in production, but still a prototype, right? Because it's still within your first 10. Yeah. And so when you use terms like alpha and beta, those really give the impression that you are already in production, and this is a pre-release of something that will happen. A prototype, if you keep calling it a prototype, even if it's a working prototype, it's easier to kill if it doesn't work, right? So it's all about setting the right expectations to the rest of the organization, right? People are very used to the development flow of alpha, beta, those kind of things from a waterfall perspective. But again, they signify that alpha is there, we are here, we know what we're doing, then beta, and then we're going to launch. Your working prototypes, even after 5 customers, may never see the light of day, right? So that's why it's all about language. And I'm very open to other suggestions of what people in the audience here, what have you used to remove ambiguity? I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, everyone get your suggestions in the chat here. And in the meantime, we do have a question from somebody in the audience, an anonymous attendee here. What are your suggestions to keep the company innovative when customers are not willing to share how they use the data you serve them? For example, B2B data companies.
Oof. That's really interesting. Let me think for a second. So the way I think about innovation and understanding the customers is about understanding the problem that they're having and the impact that is going to have. I guess I'm trying to understand if the customers are not able to share the data that they're getting from your product. Is that what you're saying? Or I guess I'm missing the second part of like.
Yeah, I guess it's hard to understand. I'm not sure if this person is able to add any clarification in as a follow-up question. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I guess it can be difficult if you're not able to see what your customers are up to, or they're not willing to give you feedback, for example. Yeah. Let's take that as in the spirit of that.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. And in the early adopter stage, I actually have a whole section on how to increase the chances of success of your pilots. And there's a couple of things that I emphasize a lot. And one of them is instrument your software from the very, very beginning. So meaning add pieces of code in your software so that you can see what your customers are doing, because they might not be able to talk to you or willing to talk to you. So if you have a way to get that information in the background, now they have to be aware that you're doing that. You're not spying on them, but that way you can do that. Because I think in B2B, it's very important to think about how every second that a customer spends with you, it's some time that they're not spending attending to their business. So it's a little bit difficult to separate them from there. So we have to make it as seamless as possible to get that. And also, when you're working with the early adopter, as part of your pilot, you can specify that you need access to certain people, that you need feedback every so often, and that you bake it in that agreement. That's how you're going to work. Not always works, but try for the best, right? So I think it's on us to create that honest of how are we going to get the right information as we go forward, right? So those are 2 techniques that I've used in the past. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah, I would hope so, for sure. Definitely helpful from my point of view. We have another couple questions in the chat. Somebody's asked, what are the steps when building a web version of a huge legacy B2B tool? Any tips for that on migration, I guess? Yeah,
the steps are the same, actually. So what I would say is the B2B Innovation Journey, I focus for new products. And so the first question that I would ask is the existing not web version, monolithic version of your software solving the right problem for your customer? Is it just a re-platform and everything is perfect? Or could you take this as an opportunity to go through these stages and better understand what other pains you're going to solve, or what are the current pains that they're having with the existing version, what else they would like to see, and then walk through this particular journey. Because if it's just a re-platform thing, first of all, there has to be a reason for that, right? But if there's no reason only than technology and maintainability, just give it to the VP of engineering, and then as a product person, move to something else, right? So, but I think that's a really good opportunity to say, what can we do with this new technology? What new problems can we solve for our customers that we weren't able to do in the past? Go through this process and find that out.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sharon has an interesting one here. So innovators want to make sure that they figure out the right problem to solve, and sponsors want to know when you can deliver the thing. So how do you strike a good balance of having time to figure things out versus getting support from the senior leadership team in those situations?
That's an excellent question. The way I approach it is by educating senior leadership of what the journey looks like, and then having intermediate deliveries so that deliverables, so they see progress towards the overall journey. Now, if what they want to see is like, when can I get money in the bank? Then there's a lot more work to do there, right? But for example, if you can set some specific milestones, which I actually laid out in the book, but you can say, for market discovery, we're going to have a readout of what we learn about the market, and we're going to propose which areas to go after. Okay, that's progress, right? We're going to do the same thing when we get the information from our champions and create a storyboard, which I describe in the book how to do that. Okay, that's a deliverable. And so they're seeing progress in the process, but that's important for them to understand that the process is iterative and it's uncertain. So they can't expect an A to B thing. Your job is to keep them involved in the process, seeing that you're delivering value from an innovative perspective, and that if they keep at it, you're going to get to eventually some profitability.
Yeah, yeah. And Paul had, oh, sorry, go on.
Oh, what's one of the things that I say at the end of the book, one of the things that I tell everybody to do is give this book to other people in your company. And I make a joke there, is like, it's not self-serving, but it's kind of hard to explain innovation. And I've already done the heavy lifting. So you can use this material to say, hey, this is what this looks like. Give it a read. Let's do a book club. Let me do a presentation for you. You, the innovator, do a presentation on what the stages are. So leverage this material. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? Leverage this, and this is the things that you're going to be doing. And then you can truly use it as a map. In the next engagement with your executive leadership, we are here. And that's how is the book laid out, right? We are here, and we're going to discuss the challenges here. Oh, now we are here, and so on, right? And so leverage this material to convince and to bring your leadership along.
Yeah, that's perfect. And I think we actually have time for one quick question. Frank has asked, he found that moving from waterfall to agile worked to prevent miscommunication. Which approach do you use?
Interesting. So I focus more on the product management aspect of things. And so I think of waterfall and agile as development areas, right? So when you're actually going to develop something, agile is better because it helps you iterate. But I think that's outside the purview of the innovator per se. In the prototyping stage, which is stage 5, you're actually going to start building. And what I recommend there is that you, as a product leader or innovator, partner very closely with your engineering leader and iterate quickly. So agile helps you really there to start implementing the things that you found worked in your experiment roadmap. Okay, this we have validation, this we have validation. Let's build these things in the next sprint, right? And that's how I see this moving together. But ultimately, those are development techniques, not strategy techniques.
Exactly. I mean, I've always said that agile enables you to be lean, but being lean is the really key part. Helps the business build something of value.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, Daniel, that's all the time we have for today. And thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today and answer all those questions. Everyone, thank you so much for your questions.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody.